you. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. That's what they say. That's what Eisen said right there on the screen. For those of you whom are just listening, yes, Eisen is saying right there. He says, because if you don't, you'll fall for anything. That's what they say, right, Dr. Thunder?
That is, and with that, we're out. No, oh, okay. Um, you stole our punchline.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome to another edition, another episode, another, shall we say, serving, another helping of Getting It Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. Today, we're going to talk about this whole idea of standing, okay? Standing for something. It's an admonishment that is a cliche. It is out there. People say stand for something, fall for it, all that kind. But what do they mean? What does Eisen mean? Can he defend himself? So, Dr. Thunder, let's just start this way. Okay, what do you think people mean? Okay, because we can obviously push back and say, what do you mean something, right? And is the standing more important than the thing? And why? What am I standing against? And is it worth it? Like, what's all this kind of talk you're talking about? Okay, how about just be pragmatic all the time, so on and so forth. What exactly do you mean? But let's just start from the what do you think they? Have you ever told somebody to stand for something? Have you ever been told you should stand for something or you'll fall for anything? What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's sounds like some advice I may give. I probably have given several times to students, um, maybe friends, um, not in a condescending way, but in more of a collaborative way. But so, if I had to weigh a level of importance, the intestinal fortitude required to be immovable, to be planted, to be firm, and what it is that you're standing on, you know, which is more important. I would say maybe one of the things is more useful than the other, but maybe I'll say that they're equally important. So the thing that's more useful, possibly, in a practical sense, since we're talking about getting ish done, I think the movable concept is the ability to stand firm. Um, you're going to find yourself in lots of different scenarios where having the ability to stick to something, even if it gets hard, and not to be easily swayed, not to be blown away or blown around by every wind of doctrine, right? That sort of thing. That's going to be a useful and important skill for you to have, the standing part. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's all you know to do.
So,
Um,
what are
yep.
the contravening winds, if you will? What are those other things? Those things you say, those other winds that'll be blowing you around. Some of them might be, let's take for example, there's a call to stand for your country. There's a call to stand with the family. There is a call to stand with the community in whatever
Mm.
position or whatever form that may take. Now, okay, where do we draw the lines regarding, well, what is the legitimate what okay, so do we just, let's say we pick one side and we just stand against the other sides? What legitimate claim do any of these other winds that are trying to blow us in different directions, what do they have? Like, is it, does your family have a claim that you should stand with them even if it's against one of some other principle that you have somewhere else? um
Mm.
what are the contentions here?
I,
And have you
I
ever
do
dealt
see.
with anything like that?
Yeah, I do see that there is somewhat of a hierarchy. I know you like hierarchies. Um, uh, so let's maybe state it as sort of a priority list. You have this stuff at the top of the list that is absolutely unshakable, all the way to stuff that may be on the bottom of the list that it's possible um, it's possible to convince me otherwise.
Mhm.
Um, and it's interesting too because uh, I think the significance of whatever it is that you're standing for, this is important. And the source, where did that come from? Who's suggesting it? How long has it been a valid suggestion? I think all of that stuff is important. Because, say, for instance, if you're just standing for something that you contrived, right? Say if it's something of your own creation that you're standing for.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I'm not saying that it's of no value to at least have to have a few heated arguments before you'll change your mind. But it might not be it might not be, the hill you want to die on, as
Mhm.
they say.
Okay, because if we were to make some kind of a false dichotomy, we would say on the one hand there's this stand for something. On the other hand, there is don't be stubborn, right? And
Mm.
we see where those where these extremes, and I'm calling the false dichotomy just because okay, well, but we can create that demarcation, and we can see where these extremes can come up in our day to day behavior, right? And before I forget, let's go ahead and let's shout out to the super chats before we continue this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, about standing for something. What is the standing, and what is the something? What is the utility of it? What are we standing against? What is it worth? What are the prices that we pay? What are the trade-offs for the standing or the sitting or the fence? Yeah, the fence sitting, for example. Like, when is fence
Right.
sitting okay? What if you're an awesome fence straddler and like, what they call that stuff? Parkour, just kind of
Mhm.
hopping and skipping and moving all over the place. Hey, if you're anyway, shout out to Jonathan. You want to read what Jonathan Barrowin has to say?
Absolutely. Just over here tricking on Ike and Dr. Thunder like the blue pill loser that I am.
Shout out to Dr. Very, very generous of you. Very generous
Thank
of
you
you,
very
sir.
much. We
$50.
hopefully from supporting this sort of content, you won't have to be characterized as a blue pill loser, at least during the time that you're on
Mhm.
this platform. So
Yes, yes, yes. The great
there is a
doctor has
silver lining.
bestowed upon you
No.
temporary, you know, temporary relief while in these hallowed grounds. You
Right,
shall know
temporary respite.
temporary
Wait a minute.
respite indeed.
What,
Sanctuary.
right, sanctuary. What is the pirate code? There's like a
Hmm.
the I can't remember what the term is, but there's a pirate code that is some of this sort of thing. You
Mm-hmm.
can be in the middle of a squabble, but they
Mm-hmm.
can they can holler out the chosen phrase, and
The safe
then
word.
you're safe. You're safe. Right. Hey, wait a minute! You can't kill him yet.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. And guess who flew by? Shout out to Sister George for flying by in your new broom, new shiny broom. I thought I saw something shine through the sky.
Uh,
Oh, come on, Dr. Thunder. Have I gone too far? Is that the line? Shout out to Dr. K Polymath over here. Uh, would you mind reading that? And what is he
sure.
saying over there?
He says, "I never." Uh, so I'm not totally
Go ahead,
sure if
interpret
the
and
misspelling.
paraphrase.
Okay, so I never stood for anything and never fell for naught.
Yeah. So and he probably wrote that on purpose just to kind of be like, oh, let me see if they can interpolate.
I think he ran out of characters because of the $2 super chat.
I think he ran out of the $2 super chat. They cut him off. His internet just his electricity just went off. His ice is currently melting in his
And the
refrigerator.
white man is holding him back.
It's holding him back hard. Holding him back hard. So let's get back to this ground here of what exactly is it, okay, that people mean when they say stand for something. And if I may, I think I've heard you say that the fortitude, the standing, what it takes, it's kind of required in this it's almost, it's not just a thing in terms of human interactions, right? Of
Mm.
principles and so on and so forth. There's something about this world that makes it such that in order for anything to exist, in other words, it has to be defined against other things, right?
Yeah.
For that inside, there has to be an outside, and there's got kind of opposition there. Otherwise, you would just be at nothing, right? That's kind of what people, uh, because the whole thing of falling for anything. Okay, let's go there. What is so bad? Okay, what's so bad about falling for anything? Mr. Eisen said it's so like this was presumed a priori agreed upon to be
Yeah.
intrinsically bad. How but we don't do that kind of stuff over here, do we, Dr. Thunder? We can't just be like, oh, that thing over there is bad thing. You know, why is it bad to fall for anything?
Yeah. So it you know I don't really answer questions. I just I just say I
I like
just
it.
say more stuff that keeps us going.
Go
Um,
ahead.
all right, so this question causes me to think of something we that I mentioned to you during our usual phone call conversation um, the day of the show, and so I was mentioning the book Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And if you haven't read that book, it's a great book. I think it is frequently misunderstood. Frequently misunderstood by So I'm going to show my hand here. I am I'm an Orthodox Christian. I'm Orthodox, and one of the differences between, say, something like the Roman Catholic or the Orthodox Church or the Anglican Church is that there can be traced back an unbroken apostolic succession back to one of the apostles, one of the 12 apostles. And one of the things that happened with the Protestant Reformation is there became sort of a disconnect there. Now, in this book, a usual interpretation, since it's called Mere Christianity, is this idea that C.S. Lewis is suggesting that, uh, you know, he's sort of defining what mere Christianity is. He's creating a category for all people that have bought into certain particular doctrines.
Mhm,
Okay, at least if you believe these doctrines, then you're a Christian. You're merely Christian, right?
mhm.
You're at least a Christian. And but that's not actually what's happening there. Uh, in the introduction to the book, he has an illustration where he talks about a hallway with doors. And the whole point there is that you can't just stay in the hallway. You need to choose one of the doors. And in the illustration, it's clear that what he's talking about, the hallway, is this sort of conception of mere Christianity. And one of the doors is where it actually becomes um, specific. Maybe in this context, behind one of the doors is what you would stand for, and the hallway is sort of the fence
Okay,
that you're straddling.
so good. So I said, what's wrong with falling? You've defined falling as this hallway, this straddling. We're going to talk about what's
Yes.
bad about the fence and what's bad about the hallway, right? And why you must go into a door, okay? Because we seem
It's
to
got to
be
choose a door.
we seem to be very confident about that truth without having to defend it a lot of times, right? Like because it still has not been defended in this court, ladies and gentlemen. Why exactly I can't just stand in that hallway? Like they're like, oh no, you gotta pick,
Well,
man. You gotta choose a side. You gotta I'm like, well, why? But ladies and gentlemen, let me see. I think Dr. Polymath has a point that he wants to make, and he said he'll make it real quick. But it's an open panel, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll bring you in one by one. You have your minutes now, Dr. Polymath, to state, even though we've put a flag on this point about why the fence or the hallway is so bad, state what it is you had to say, comment, or question pertaining to the topic, sir.
Hey, can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Good. What's up, fellas?
Hello, sir.
Good, good. I can see Ike's blood vessel about to pop because I'm taking my time. So I'll start anyways. I think I like the analogy used with the mere Christianity. If I understand it right enough, there is an aspect of having to make a choice. For example, some of us might be too abstract and sort of think of God and, yes, that's true. But then there's a specific point, which is Christ, believing in a certain kind of sacrifice of Christ that then allows you to sort of get that final test in order to be qualified race driver on the street. So imagine you're going out there, you've got your you can drive, but you don't have the legal responsibilities to drive. So yeah, you can kind of get away with it, but when it really matters, when you really need it, and the police are out there, well, you can't drive. Not just that, you probably get put away in a cold, empty cell, or worse, maybe it's filled with other people. So there is there's an issue where when you don't stand for something, you don't quite get all the benefits of right. Now, I do want to make a point here about the whole standing for anything point that I made earlier is I still don't think you need to stand for anything, but if I'm fair, what I'll do say is that a person needs to have some principles. I think that's what's really meant by that point. I know I'm being a little bit more fair now. It's yes, everyone needs a principle. Whether that principle is so fundamental or it's a slightly different level, that's up for debate. But yes, you do need to have a principle, whether that's standing. So nothing thing created it from a very sort of evidence-based, consequence-based sort of thinking framework. But you can also have a standing for something internally. So you can have your own principles. On the outside, for example, I've never voted. I probably will never vote because I think it's stupid for me to vote. But it doesn't mean I don't stand for the principles that would lead someone to vote. It's just I'm more selective, and the consequences of my actions are not necessarily defeating my internal reasons for why I do things.
Okay. So two things here. There's the hallway, right? There is the falling for anything. There is the fence sitting, and then there is the assertion that it is bad. You came in, K Polymath, and then we'll go to you now, Dr. Thunder, and you've just kind of you platonized the thing by saying everyone needs to have a principle, right? It's almost like there must be a definition, otherwise things. In other words, it does not exist. Like even if you are aware of it or not, like there is a notion, for example, that even if you don't know what you stand for, you're standing for something, right? You're just standing for this kind of a program that tends to work itself through evolutionary whatever, or your biology, or your certain something is still governing, something is ruling, either your stomach is ruling, or your upper head or your lower head or whatever is ruling, right? So that's what I've heard you say, K Polymath. And my whole thing to that is still okay, because it's almost like you're pushing the question further and further out, but we still have not said why it is not okay to just be a complete, is it nihilist at this point? What would I say? But anyways, let me before we go all the way there, sir, Dr. Thunder, anything to say in response to what he said, and also with the question on the table about what's so bad about that hallway, that fence, what's so bad about falling for anything?
Yeah, I don't disagree with Polymath. Now, I would say that okay, so I want to talk about this with reference to benefits of standing for something as opposed to something is good and something is bad.
Okay.
Because there may be at times things that you must stand on the stand on the fence. I just introduced another problem. Okay, uh, uh, where sitting on the fence may actually be the appropriate thing for you to do because you haven't weighed out the details. Now, maybe I would argue that the longer you're on the fence, the less ground you're covering, or the loss you're losing more ground that you could have been going in a particular direction.
Okay.
So I
Opportunity
may
cost. I
argue
like it.
that. But so I would say the benefit of standing for something, and in this sense, since we're talking about the doorway, one of the reasons that we know that C.S. Lewis in that illustration was not suggesting that all that was necessary is some sort of surface level Christianity, some sort of basic, at least you've done this amount of stuff, so then you can at least get in the hallway, because he was Anglican. He was high Anglican. So he chose a specific door, and he wrote extensively about Anglicanism, very specifically. And so it wasn't just that he was that because his parents were that. No, he had wrestled with ideas and chosen that doorway. So from the perspective of someone that has chosen a doorway, in the illustration that he provided, it seems that he is saying that you can't get sufficiently deep in anything unless you have sort of staked your claim. Otherwise you're sort of, the lack of sort of commitment makes things less significant. Everything is less significant by definition. Now, it keeps everything at the same level of significance, but nothing is allowed to really become deeper. And so you have to make a choice at some point if depth is your goal. If you want to stay on the surface, maybe to protect from future options or opportunities, that's one thing. But again, staying there for too long, if in the end all you're going to do, okay, so let's okay, we're in the manosphere. So let's talk about something that modern women are that we point out that they're guilty for, and that is refusing to make a commitment and locking somebody down when they're young, and just pushing it off later and later and later, and thinking that something better is going to come, and then voila, they're past the wall. Nothing better is out there. Where did all the men go? Right? Same sort of idea.
Okay. So I like it. It's basically this opportunity cost. There's a time aspect to this whole thing, which is you cannot escape the whole time thing. Of course not. Which universe are you in? Right? We are living, and there's so on that side, there's a opportunity cost thing. And then in terms of what you said you were going to do, you were going to talk about pragmatic benefits, right? So pragmatic benefits wise, you say opportunity cost, but also you talk about concentration, focus, right? Acuteness, as opposed to diffusion and dispersion and so on and so forth. And you can say, hey, you could hover above for a while in order to kind of check the scene, gather the facts, but then make sure you focus for the reasons just mentioned. Now, okay, well, Mr. And I'll say that's better. I think you've given the pragmatic one. It is left for the Platonist on the panel to defend his position about everyone must have a principle, and he thinks that he has explained something by making assertions and declarations. But Eisen, what you got for us, sir?
Thanks for having me on.
And welcome. This is your first time, I think, on the. I don't know if it's your first time on the panel.
This is my second time I've come up here before. My second. It's just been a while.
Oh, okay. Well, what you got?
What I have is, I like to get into the Bible, as you know, like from time to time, just a little bit. And so I wanted to attack this from that standpoint as well as a pragmatic standpoint. We all know in there the scripture where it talks about where Jesus said he doesn't like lukewarm. Either you're hot or you're cold. And we all know throughout the history of the text, God has been a God of war too. So when you talk about it from the pragmatic standpoint of war, anybody that's not picking a side, they're not picking a side so they can stab you in the back. They're waiting for that right time. So inevitably, that's why he says, I don't do the lukewarm, either hot or cold. So even if you don't pick a side, you try to sit in the middle. What ends up happening is a side gets chosen for you from that aspect.
I like it. I like it very well. The lukewarm will get spit out. Is that not what happens, Dr. Thunder?
That's right.
Okay, so Dr. Polymath, okay. I think that we've laid out some things on the table here regarding, I think that what Eisen mentioned there is almost from an aesthetic point of view, that, there's something distasteful about lukewarm stuff. And from a war standpoint, adding to the pragmatism. But Dr. Polymath, when you say people should have a principle, right? And I perhaps alluded to something which could be vaguely connected to that, where I was like, okay, there's something about having a definition, which must be an inside against an outside, so on and so forth. Otherwise, something has no handle, no utility, no definition, no existence, cannot be engaged in causality, if you will, can't push things around. Any defense on your side, which I'm calling the Platonist side, or maybe I'm mischaracterizing you? Go ahead.
Yeah. So in terms of pragmatism, I think, as I said in the chat, there is a value in utilizing heuristics. They do something for the average person that is generally good. So as a wisdom sort of thing, if you want to write it down as a wisdom science, generally stand for things, it's a good thing. However, if you're looking more into like some individual development as a person, you don't want to be the kind of person that stands for things, because that means you start to be unable to deal with nuances and chaos in real time. So you have let me give two cases here. You have the man who's reached the red pill. He's heard stories from other men about how marriage turns up. Now, unfortunately, he believes these stories, and then when he does get married, he's unwilling and unable to give his wife wins, because he can see everything she's doing. He can see that she's playing games. He can see that she's instituting arguments, even though she can't win them, and then she becomes unable to take responsibility. He's watched all the Kevin Samuels videos. Now, the problem with this man is he has such strong standing for things, I don't even want to use the word principles, that he's unwilling to now sort of just say, yeah, so what? Let her win sometimes. Let her feel good, because at the end of the day, this is a dual part relationship. And because he stands for something, he unfortunately, then his relationship ends up even.
They got him.
I think they got it.
That was actually quite funny. He was just getting heated too. He was like getting he was about to get it in. But okay, so I think
the rigidity, right? So
yes,
rigidity versus
what kind of standing here? Is it standing like I like images, right? So they're standing like a cat, right? And then
yeah, but if you're standing like a cat, then you're just sitting at that point, right? Because if you're not doing anything, right? If
I'm not saying the cat is doing something, but the cat is not rigid. Is the point? So that the cat can allow. you know.
Now let's use a horrific example. Sorry, everyone who's going to get triggered, but Tulsa, right? When they set up that young man who saw some vanilla peace leaf and was excited, and then they said that he tried to steal that peace leaf, and they utilized it in order to attack the good people of Tulsa, right? Do you think they wanted the kakuna, the plain piece of paper man who was sort of standing there like a cat, or did they want the kakuna who was going to donate his plane so that they can bomb the city of Tulsa?
Okay, okay. So here's the
Right.
thing. I was only
So-
trying to explain your position, right? You're saying, 'cause I'm sure you're the cat. You can't
right,
even
yeah,
come here.
I am the cat.
Okay, then. So are you gonna you have to defend the cat? You can't be coming and being like, oh, but the people don't want the cat. It's like, okay, I'm saying, okay, you're saying that the cat stance, the stance of non-rigidity, as alluded to by Dr.
Yes,
is the stance
exactly.
to take. Otherwise, you would start doing silly things like finding the justifications for your principles everywhere you look, even in your relationships. And you're like, there she is doing that thing now, and blah blah blah.
Yes,
okay?
But I want to make a clear demarcation that's different from what Eisen mentioned about, let's say, the Christ situation of not being lukewarm. Because the Christ situation, at least as far as people understand it, they tend to mean more of action, or rather belief sort of centric thing. You can believe in everything. For example, I can be the most Advent believer in Yahweh, right? Doesn't mean I'm going to join every single movement that is embedded in Yahwehism, because I'm not going to stand just because it's there. I'm going to stand for the point that meets all my principles to a sufficient state. Then I'm going to act. So internally, my soul is burning, right, with fire, but my actions do not necessarily need to reflect what people assume that someone whose soul is burning should be doing.
Taboo Smash in the house. Taboo Smash in the house with the super chat. Mind reading that for us, kindly, Dr. Thunder?
Yes, sir. My tricking abilities are not powerful enough, Jonathan. Interesting show. Do you think if you stand for nothing or compromise, you become weakened?
It has been perhaps mentioned. You mentioned delusion, right? You mentioned a weakened solution. You mentioned an unfocused attack, right? You want to be dispersed. You want to be concentrated, so on and so forth. That is a kind of a weakening, right?
Right. So it's like equally superficial. Like everything is at the same level of right. See, that would be, if there's a benefit of being on the fence, that's the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the benefit is, and you could frame that as being a negative too, I suppose. But the benefit is that everything is at the same sort of level, the same amount of depth on a lot of stuff. But if I really want to get deep, then I'm going to have to say, okay, at least put a priority list on something and say, okay, let me at least favor this thing, and then I'll get a little deeper in that thing, and then maybe favor this other thing and get a little, but otherwise you stay at the same level of it's an issue that I often have with young musicians. Okay. So we have a lot of access to a lot of music these days. All right. Like everything in recorded history is like accessible some kind of way in some sort of streaming service, most of which on YouTube. Right. And there's no skin in the game either, right? So you can get on there and you don't have to pay anything. And so what that does is it creates a situation where you can listen to a lot of stuff, but it can also mean that you're not going to be particularly deep in a particular style or a particular artist. And so I'll ask students of mine, I'll say, hey, so who do you listen to? And they'll say, oh, I listen to everything. So what kind of music you like? Oh, I love it. All kind of music. I like, oh yeah, everything. I like just all kind of music. Okay. name an artist that you dig. Okay, all right, well, okay, well, I like Charlie Parker, or I like, of course they wouldn't say that, or I like,
Justin
you
Timberlake.
know, yeah, Justin Timberlake or something like this. Okay, all right, name an album, from Justin Timberlake. I don't know if I can name an album. Okay, give me 5 songs from that album and tell me something specific about them, right? So they likely they can't even do that because everything, because of the vast amount of stuff and the unwillingness to sort of make a commitment in a particular direction. And maybe part of it is because maybe, it's a little FOMO, a little fear of missing out. Like if I sell out over here, then that means I'm going to miss out on all this other stuff. But the thing that we have to come to, and the sooner that we come to this, the better off we'll be, is that you can't have everything. Now, men have always known that we can't have everything, and that we have to make choices in a certain sense. But but with respect to something like what it is I'm talking about here, it's often challenging to start walking in a particular direction. And so you have to do that, and you have to do it as soon as you can start doing it. And even if you pick something that ultimately is not the thing that you're going to want, at least you have learned that thing well enough to know that for sure that that's not what you want to do.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll never know. So
let me approach my kind of invigilation in a different way here. I see us we've created this dialectic here, this kind of polarization, where on the one hand we've emphasized greatly the importance of that narrowly focused, standing for something, getting all the benefits and not losing out on all the opportunity costs and so on and so forth, in order to get things done, in order to be somebody, and so on and so forth, right? While on the other pole, we have created another peak, right? And this other peak is the peak of the cat, right? Because the cat is a master of the hallway. The cat is a master of the fence. Okay. And we're saying that there is a meta, therefore, it could be said, a meta discernment that needs to know when both of these peaks needs to be approached, right? And with that, let's go to Eisen, and then we'll go to Dr. K Polymath if he's still there, and then back to Dr. Thunder. But what I'm seeing here is, on the one hand, you want to be able to skate over the fence, you want to be able to be that cat, okay? But on the other hand, you want to be able to do that thing where you dive in. Therefore, it seems to me that you have to have another level, which is discernment, to see the possibilities and the movements within this landscape. But anything you want to say, Eisen Sama?
Yes, before I go, I do want to address that last part of that question that we have up here. That do you think if you stand for nothing or compromise, you become weakened? If you compromise, you're already weak. If you're standing for nothing, the longer you wait, the more it shows how weak you are and what your weaknesses are.
That's interesting.
You always got you got the military. You came over here with the sword avatar and everything, all samurai now, always talking about war.
But it can apply to other aspects of regular everyday life as well.
Indeed, too, so. Indeed. So, Dr. K Polymath, any other iterations, sir?
Yeah, have they got me? Have they finally let me out of the microphone jail?
They are. Okay, you're out. Enjoy
okay,
your
good. Yeah. Okay. So I think to add on to what Eisen Sam is saying is that you will be perceived as weak. I think to say that you are weak, that's subjective, but you will be perceived as weak. And if you are in a societal situation, right? Let's say I'm looking for an employee, or I'm looking for someone to help me build something, whatever that building is. It could be war, it could be an actual building, a YouTube channel, you do want someone who has principles of, or rather a track record of having completed things. This generally shows that they stand for things, right? If you're looking for someone who stability and I guess trust of completion is useful, yeah, you will look for someone who you see as strong, someone who can do a 9-to-5 job if that's all their option is, and be able to support their family, for example. You don't want the perpetual entrepreneur who doesn't make enough to even live a comfortable life, but is always talking about it. You don't want that guy, right? You want either the stable man who can do a 9-to-5, or the stable entrepreneur who can create business. However, I also want to give the perspective of the individuals who basically, they don't really care so much about being societally useful. Some of these individuals will go and do their thing, and then the good thing about time is not always linear. At some point in time, something would perhaps, if they stick to it, blow up, and these people are going to be able to benefit more, right? Let me give myself a small example here. I'm not going to take this vaccine. I don't want your channel to get banned. I'm not going to take this vaccine. Why? Because there's no benefits to me personally. I don't have any health issues that I know of, apart from small stuff that's unrelated. And as well as the science is unproven, it's not gone through any testing for the 5 years that's required. It's unsafe technically by any means of any. So that all the evidence suggests that it's unsafe, right? And the benefit is not great. Now, I am not an idiot either. If this was Ebola, right? I don't care if it's not being tested. And if it's affecting a lot of people, I'll take it, right? So that's how I make the decision. I'll sit on the fence right now because there is no net benefit. The only benefit I'll take it is if there was a passport that says I don't have to keep taking these tests when I'm traveling in the country. Again, very pragmatic reason. So what I'll do is I'll always move if the consequences of moving are geared more towards me. If there is no consequence, I'm not going to do it. I don't vote because guess what? My one little vote is not going to affect any system. So I'm not going to waste my time to go through that whole thing. Now, if I wanted to make change, what I'll do is I'll go to the local authorities, get people to come together, rile them up, and then get them to vote for a particular thing. Maybe the council tax is too high. Get us to change that. But the whole sort of countrywide, large-scale tribal warfare thing where my vote, I'm not going to waste my time there.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So, Dr. Thunder, or you got the microphone.
Yeah. So a couple things. First thing is when you were talking there, Polymath, it reminded me of something a pastor friend of mine said when I was working for him. It was the first job I had after I finished my master's degree. And he would frequently say, when the pain of staying the same is exceeded, when the pain of changing surpasses the pain of staying the same, then you will change. So the reason I'm saying this is that so long as sitting on the fence is not some sort of avoidance of pain, and then therefore the events in one's life become the deciding factors, and rather than you being the master of your own destiny, as long as that's not a part of what we're talking about here, then I don't necessarily see fence sitting, so long as it isn't too long of a period. And I can't tell you what too long of a period is, and maybe that is why Polymath said that time is not always linear. No. I would like you to tell me exactly what you meant by time is not always linear. I think I understand, but I would like you to expound.
Oh yeah, he Dr. Polymath. Exact. I was gonna ask that question too. Now, because the reason why I was gonna bring it up, because it is something that I also, it's a concept, the whole thing of exponential growth and the whole thing of kind of non-linearities in terms of getting things done and thinking. But
But that's
I,
different. That's so that's sort of so you have sort of like moments in time, and then you have sort of metronomical, time, something that is measured,
mhm,
and then you have sort of perception of time,
mhm,
right? So all of those things could be different, and as you become better at something, it could take less time for you to do it, and so then maybe that's a sense where time is not linear.
mhm.
uh but that's why I wanted to ask.
Yeah, and before he answers, and I was gonna, because I was thinking about that when he said it, and I wanted to also take the opportunity to clarify, and perhaps it's a good little tangent here to go into.
Sweet.
Um, the the non-linearity really is in the relationship okay, so there are many ways in which time is not linear. Okay, we all know relativity. Let's put that aside, right? Okay, in physics, time is actually not linear. Okay, really, faster you go, so on and so forth, right? And then you also mentioned in terms of ability, from a perception, from first person perspective too, there's a change in perception of time and so on and so forth. Okay, but in terms of relationship, let's say with the growth of your business relative to time, right? That graph is not always going to be a linear thing, and at some point it's going to do
Right.
an exponential curve. That one is just a plain, and I think that's the one that's most ubiquitously meant when people say that thing about time not being linear. But I don't like that phrase, time is not linear, in that context, because it sounds like you're saying some physics thing. I'd rather say that the relation, but there's no other clean way, because the other thing is that, well, growth is not linear, always linear in
Right.
time, or X is not always linear in time, or Y and C. So the relationship of any particular thing is not parameter with time is not. Anyways, Dr. Polymath, defend yourself on the time thing.
Okay, so what I mean here, at least one iteration of what I mean, is that let's use the current situation: Abba and Preach versus Fresh and Fit, right? Both are people that we would respect some of the opinions they make. Would I be correct for that assertion?
Beta.
Okay, cool. Now, it
I didn't know that.
now now I or rather
Amazing.
we amazing. Yeah. Now we could each make a video and stick with one person. Say, "Oh, I agree with this person more. I agree with that person less," or etc. 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 Now, 2 months later, they make up. You already said your things. They don't necessarily want to collaborate with you anymore. What? You see the point here. There's a timing aspect. You don't just engage, because once you're committed to something, unfortunately, the world will hold you to that commitment, regardless of if the
Mm.
world changes past that commitment. So sometimes it's good to sit on the fence to wait for the right opportunity to strike. So it's a slight meta strategy over there, rather than just sitting on the fence because you are a lazy sloth necessarily, or just non-committal. It's waiting for the right opportunity where everything meets, and then you can cut it nicely. Because most things in this world are fickle. Protestants fought Catholics. They both thought they were right, but guess what? They're both wrong. God doesn't want his children killing each other over useless things. I mean, it makes no sense, right? So most things people stand for are fickle, and the time nature is, it actually erodes quickly. So if you then include timelessness into it, or rather just expand it a little bit more, you are actually going to be in a far better place to do it. And guess what? You're in a better position to avoid that whole I forgot what it's called, the gambler thing, where, oh, you've invested so much, so you got to finish it. It's like, if you
Sunk
never really,
cost.
yes, sunk cost fallacy.
Okay. So it would seem that on my previous platonic quest of whatever, it just seems like as though, for now, I'm satisfied with the notion that this whole have a principle, pick a side, stand for something, it's something that is kind of just imposed on us. It's almost like asking, well, why do I need to obey gravity? In other words, as a living
Mm.
being, you're gonna need to do stuff. Okay, you're
Right.
gonna need to go left. All right. Do I pay tag or not? Like, you're gonna need to make decisions, especially as a human being. I always like to juxtapose us with trees. If I could just stand there and have nutrients and fight and the sunlight and not have to make decisions, right? And one could even argue that the roots of the tree have to make decisions and so on and so forth. Blah 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 blah. But it seems like something that's imposed on us. But then our capacity to discern again and then move between these two peaks of one being maximally focused, maximally principled, maximally standing for something, and then on the other being able to be that cat that waits, sees, hops, and so on and so
But
forth.
you
Because we
gotta
can
be fair
see
here. That's the thing.
what's unfair. Go ahead. What do you mean?
You gotta be fair. I think this is what I did want to come for you earlier, but then Eisen came, and then I got derailed a little bit. I wanted to come for you because there are some people that actually do need to be able to stand for things because that's how they are as a people. Meaning, they need to be able to believe in the culture. For example, let's use a current situation. I believe in the scientists. I believe in the government. We should wear masks, even though effectively the virus is a lot smaller than the whole pores. So if you're logical, you say, okay, let me buy the right mask, N95. The rest of the masks are just for show. But there are some people who need to stand for things because they themselves don't have the ability to resolve between two things. They don't have the ability to know. See, Dr. Thunder gets on his instrument, guitar or saxophone. He
You
can
just
tell
saying
you if
people
you're
are
going up.
dumb. You're just taking a very, very elaborate
No,
way
no,
of
no.
talking about the ability to resolve, the ability to know. What are these euphemisms?
I would not use the word dumb, right? Because that's a
I would
completely
not,
different
I
thing.
would not use that. That's not what I mean.
No, but there's a point here. Dr. Thunder, right? He knows music theory, right? You don't know music theory as much, right? But you might feel it. Dr. Thunder will be able to feel it and then also tell you, hang on, you're going off key. You need to be able to drop a half or a semitone in order to come back, then resolve it this way. He can resolve the mathematical components of music. You can't do it, but you can feel it. Now, there are people who are tone deaf. A tone deaf person, if you show them where to stay on the scale, they'll do it more or less, right? But they don't have the ability to resolve and find the key by themselves. Let's say someone else starts changing the key, a woman starts singing differently. They just don't have the ability to reliably start playing in the right key again. So I want you to be fair for these people. These people do need to follow a system or a authority
I like it.
in
No,
order to
I
actually
like it a
move.
lot because other than that very obvious dimension, that very obvious spectrum of, okay, let's just call it intelligence, right? Other than that very obvious one, you're saying, actually, there are ways of learning which we know are very different amongst people who you might consider equally intelligent. And then you have people like, having perfect pitch and people who don't. And it just is what it is, right? So therefore, there may be other analogies, other things that are analogous to perfect pitch in other cognitive functions, right? Other ways in which we perceive the world, where this other person does not see that thing. They don't see that color, they don't see that nuance, and they will never see it. And you acting as though, so
I'm
you're
colorblind,
saying
for
we should be
example.
fair. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
Go ahead.
colorblind, for example. That doesn't make me dumb just because I can't see nuances of reds and I can't differentiate between reds and greens at a high level. So yes, some people, yeah. So I wanted to make that kind of point salient. So separate it from the philosopher kings out there who think they can make any decision like Dr. Thunder and Eisen, and separate it from some of us who actually do literally need to find the right people to follow.
Shots fired. Oh, okay. Go.
Yeah.
It seems like you want to say something, Dr. Thunder. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple things. So one thing is, so this is interesting. What we're talking about here. So you have sheep, right? And the sheep need a shepherd. This is what we're talking about.
Exactly. Right. It's in the
And
Bible.
right, and without the shepherd, the sheep are going to be totally lost. They need. They're too vulnerable by themselves. I think one of our issues is that it seems that the number of sheep is expanding, and there are fewer people that seem to be able to have, enough flexibility, and yeah, so then being on the fence in that sense is not a bad thing.
Mhm.
There are a couple other things I want to say. One of them is I made a point about choosing something because you want to be the master of your own destiny and you don't want other things imposing their will on you.
Mhm.
Because if you stay in the same place for long enough, you will eventually have to move, but it won't be because you chose to. It'll be because you're trying to get out of the way of something. Right? It'll be like a survival strategy rather than a improvement strategy. And then the last thing I wanted to say is about, and I've said something to this effect before, when you get deep in any particular thing, that can show you principles that are universal principles that will be useful in getting deep in anything else, because you have a lot of similar principles, things, the whole idea of the university, unity and diversity, and finding the quintessence, the essence that binds the four essences together, and all of that. It's about finding the things that are in common, though they be different disciplines. I see a lot of connections, for instance, between music and the effort in the practice room that it takes. And when you get to points of frustration and pressing through the frustration, and then, overnight, all of a sudden you can play something at 10 BPMs faster than you could play it before. And it's just these kinds of things. And like weightlifting or like weight training, the same kind of thing where you're plateaued, and then all of a sudden you're just stronger. But there's a lot of those kinds of principles that I think that you would find in a lot of areas, and by really drilling down deep in one particular area, even if it's just about the process, you're learning things that are going to be applicable when you need to get depth in other areas. And I would argue that the things that you get deep in that are subsequent, you'll be able to accelerate. And in that sense, time is not linear, right? Right. So you would do it faster than the first thing.
Let's go ahead and acknowledge the super chat before we continue this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, this very, very apt and apropos conversation about taking a stand for something, because it was referred to earlier by K Polymath that there is beef in these streets. Well, when is there not beef? But anyways, something that Abba mentioned with regard to that beef, and yes, we will read the super chat momentarily, Dr. Thunder will. Abba mentioned that the whole thing about principle, right? That there is an idea of, well, I have to speak my mind, even though, right, I went and I ate bread at your table yesterday. Well, what you said, sir, I cannot stand. And as a fellow gentleman, I have to challenge you to a duel now, that kind of a thing. And my honor is at stake. I have to take a stand there. But anyways, if you can read what the super chatter says, and then
Absolutely.
I think we can get back to this kind of a principle thing again, and knowing when to keep when keeping it real goes wrong, if you will, right?
All right. I'm understanding. So this is from Mike Love, $5 super chat. Thank you, sir. I'm understanding the president's. I stand squarely behind my decision. After Taliban takes Kabul, sorry, then weakened himself by blaming others.
Okay, so I guess what could be abstracted from that basically is the idea of the flip-flop, if you will.
Yeah.
And in other words, stand for something and stay there. If you start reshuffling the cards in the middle of the game, that's generally frowned upon, right? People don't like.
Look, part of the, and I might have to. Let's see here. What do I got here?
Well, you want me to
Yeah.
go full screen 5D on this? Oh my god!
I
Oh my
might have
God.
to go 5D on this.
Let's go.
So right now we're experiencing the effects of flip-flop. Okay, so massive distrust of media, of politicians, of doctors, of the science. Misinformation is all over the place. But the thing is that actually the science has actually been pretty consistent throughout. As the science has changed, then of course you will do things different as you learn more. And science is not something that you know it all at one point. It's ever growing, ever expanding. But what has happened is the politics of the thing have got involved, so that it makes it very difficult to tell the difference between when something is being done for political purpose, or if something is being done because the science that we know more scientifically.
Mhm.
And so a lot of flip-flopping by politicians prior to this the 2020 election. Many of the folks that are ardent supporters and that are claiming that you are doing your country a disservice by not getting the poke, not getting the jab, and or we're saying that if you get the jab, then that therefore you don't have to do X, Y, and Z. All of these things. So folks that were on one side of this have completely flopped because the person in the White House is different and supports some of their interests, whereas the last guy they had such a detest for that didn't matter if he said anything right, they were going to find a way to distance themselves from it.
Okay, I want to
So
say, and I'll okay, sorry, go ahead, conclude.
yeah, so the flip flopping is a that's a real thing, and that's maybe one of the more practical components of what it is that we're talking about right now, is that if you stand for something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't nuance, but certainly you can't be telegraphing that you have some ulterior motives, and that's why you are flip flopping to something else. So.
Mm-hmm. The whole flip-flopping topic is interesting in many regards. I'll go to Eisen next after this. I talk about aspects of the landscape or aspects of jobs, aspects of organizations whereby there's more likely to be BS, more likely to be politics. There is no politics in plumbing, for example. Either the toilet is fixed or not. There's no politics in dentistry, for example. There's no politics in heart surgery. There's no politics, generally speaking. When I say there's no politics, I don't mean that. I mean it's a tough one. You can't get in physics, experimental physics, and so on and so forth. You can't fool those things where there is it is an encounter, if you will, with external reality. Now, the more removed from an external reality and the more you're into the committee of XYZ in the United Nations, the more you're just in a cesspool of bullshit, right? And having this kind of demarcation between aspects of human life where there's this line between is it like dentistry or is it like being in the United Nations is a key aspect. But there's something that you mentioned about more sheep. You said more sheep. And now we're looking at the fact that even medicines are now political. I don't think I've ever seen that one before, where it's like you cannot say anything about chloroquine. And for people like myself who grow up in Nigeria, for example, or grew up in West Africa where malaria is a thing, right? We know very much about chloroquine, and chloroquine is great, right? I'm like, it makes sense that you would use chloroquine for something like this, or this kind of because malaria is pretty bad, and you get malaria is if it were malaria, I would get the vaccine. Okay, just like okay. So we know about malaria, serious issue over there in Nigeria. You get it at least once a year. Pretty bad stuff. Chloroquine helps a lot. It gets injected, or you take it. Very bitter tablets. I remember. But now it's like, oh, you can't say chloroquine, otherwise you're with you're that guy, you know, or you can't say ivermectin now, you know, maybe they'll take this video down or flag now because I just said that word because that's a political drug now. You have to say the party line. However, though, because this ties in with something about more sheep that you said, but I want to push back against it. In other words, I'm even adding more evidence. I'm steel manning your point that it seems to be the case that it's just more sheep-like, right? However, I just want to, for the point of pushing back, open up the question by asking, can we push back? In other words, obviously, we don't just go blindly down where some seeming evidence leads us, right? Is it the case that it's that kind of thing where, these days children are so weak or whatever, blah, blah, blah? Is there something about the passage of time and so on and so forth and the human lifespan such that we keep on seeing things as just being more, as degenerating? Is this one aspect of that kind of a thing? Or is it a media thing where now we just see more the sheepishness of people where we never quite knew before how everything was a mass, blah, blah, blah. But let me think about that. But let me go to Eisen. Eisen has anything to say. But my general challenge is, or my general challenge to us is to say, hey, can we push back on this idea that, it's just more sheepish now? Or is there something else going on here? Anything to add, Eisen?
Yes, I would say that the reason why it appears that there's more sheep now is because you have more people in the world now. And as well as technology, it helps to expose how sheepish that people are. I mean, when you go back to, let's go back to Germany. When you look at it, I mean, their republic democracy went up with thunderous applause. I mean, you look at governments such as Italy with Mussolini, Stalin over there. The majority of people have always been sheep and always will be, especially whenever governments expose this, how people are. The one thing that you find is that it's the reason why I said whenever you compromise, you're weak. Because if you're strong, you don't have to compromise. You can play whatever hand you want, and who's ever weaker, they have to compromise to whatever you set out, whatever you laid out. You find that people, they do want somebody else to believe in. They want to follow somebody else. They want to put their hopes and faith into other powerful individuals. One, mainly because they don't want the responsibility of becoming strong themselves. The responsibility of that is too great for them. That's all I got. I got to go, guys, but this has been a good one. I got to get up early.
Oh, no, good. Thank you. Always welcome. Shout out to Eisen Sama in the house. Check out his channel, ladies and gentlemen. But great point back to that whole idea of the strength game. There's something very desert nomad about the aesthetic of that time, because one thing you would people say, and it's true about certain let's say Arab culture, and it's not just the Arabs, I call it desert nomad type cultures, right? There's this very thing, there's something about like great hospitality that they tend to have, which makes sense, right? Like when you live in the desert, right? The idea is that, hey, if you find anybody, treat them well, give them food, give them water, that makes perfect sense. It's like, because that could be you, in other words, it's rough out here. So be nice to people. Like, that's what all of those nomadic kind of desert cultures have, that kind of a thing. But they also have a thing about you only negotiate in weakness. In other words, they never quite say the thing where a Western man might do, where might say, I'm just being strategic right now, right? They're like, no, I'm just weak right now. That's why, and there's a very kind of stoic acceptance of, yes, I'm weak. That's why if I wasn't weak, I'll be chopping your head off right now. That's kind of like the logic. And it seems to be sound at a certain level of analysis, which is, well, it is kind of true. If you were strong, if you had the ultimate strength, if you were Thanos, you would not be at the negotiating table, would you? Right? So anyways, I just wanted to say that about our desert nomad friends. And Dr. Polymath, anything to say vis-a-vis what has been said so far? And also my last, shall we say, pushback against us to challenge the notion of whether people are more sheep-like these days.
So let me ask you a question. So do you think that in the space of like 25 years in the internet revolution, somehow the core tenets of human civilization and ego has somehow flipped. Really,
I was gonna ask him about how long it took before they started worshiping the calf. Okay, you, Dr. Polymath, I know you probably can refresh me on this biblical reference. Okay,
right?
didn't they
So
start worshiping the calf pretty quickly after something?
100%. So
okay.
Yahweh, Yahweh basically rescues these niggas from Egypt, right? And I say niggas for a reason, right? Because
yeah, I know what you're doing. Go ahead.
80 people went into Egypt. Somehow they came out as thousands. Okay, so these niggas from Egypt have been rescued from slavery. Okay, they're now desert dwelling, literally going around. And I don't know how they got lost. Literally, Egypt is here. Israel is literally on the same border. Anyways, they get lost for 40 years for various reasons, right? Now, immediately after Yahweh rescues them, you know what they do? Moses goes to the mountain to get his meditation so that he can receive the tablets, right? Not your iPhone, right? Just an old school tablet. Now, I know the chloroquine either, right? A different kind of tablet. So it still has a so Moses is gone now. Aaron is chilling with this Jews in the desert, right? Do you know what they do? They start building a massive golden calf, right? They take all the gold. Well, I don't know all of them, but they take some gold that they took from the Egyptians, right, on their trip out. They start to burn it, and then they learn great Bronze Age technology. They burn it, and then they create a golden calf. Do you know what they started saying? This is the God that rescued us out of Egypt. They start to do idol worship in the middle of the Exodus. These niggas are insane, flip-flopping like a McDonald's worker. Literally, these people are mad. So basically, I do not think people are more sheepish or less standing for anything. I actually think basically that we tend to analyze things from a particular lens. I think that it's in our attention that we're focusing right now on these things that we can clearly see, such as, let's say, the tribal things going on in the media, in the politics. That's where our focus is on. If you go to any other civilization or society, even today, in somewhere else in the world, same things are going. Culture itself is tribalism, right? Accepting that X person should be in the kitchen, X person should do this. This is all just, it's the same thing, right? We're submitting to a game and a rule structure that makes no sense, apart from you like it or you don't like it, but people will use arguments and logic to defend it. So we're only just focusing through the lens of these things that we're seeing right now, because that's the thing that's in our focus plate. But go anywhere else, it's the same thing. It's just politics. And now what Dr. Pender said about the science, yeah, he's right. The science has not changed. So the masks do provide some protection for the large majority of population. Of course it does. It will reduce the viral load that can get either from you or from someone else into you, slow down the infection rate, 100%. But do they protect the individual? Hell no, right? Because the pore size is much bigger than the virus size. That's basic science there. So it will reduce the chances, but it's not a very effective way. Get the N95 mask, etc. They could have just said this, but they won't, because they don't believe that the average person has the ability to resolve the truth for themselves. So they'd rather just kind of mask things, and whatever they want to project outside is what they're going to promote.
You don't believe that the most, you have said, in this very broadcast, sir. So therefore, that is the only way to go about it, is to tell people tell people stuff that they should do, and because they need to be told something and they need to do something.
But the issue is right now they're making a mistake. The mistake they're making is they're sort of creating falsities within their stating. They can just tell us what to do. They don't have to start misinformation and trying to play this politics.
You would like them to at least use some Vaseline? Is that what you're saying?
Lubricated.
Treat you nice. Like they used to give me lamb roast and wine before. Now they just they're so rough.
Look, they're not going to tell me the truth anyways. Just tell me what to do and don't lie to me. Don't give me a false dream. Just tell me what to do, right? At this point, because you already don't trust me. To go back to Abba Preach quickly, is one of their videos got taken down because they were apparently misinformation, right? All they said is, I'm not so sure I want to take this vaccine because there's not enough time that's gone through it. Nothing in misinformation, but I get it. I get it. It's going to confuse people. And if you believe that, especially if you're the leader, right, of the team, you want there to be some order, right? If you're in an army and you're going to have loads of different conflating commands. No, you want a very clear, precise command, and it's better to alienate one side and fight a war that way than give people nuanced arguments when they don't have the ability to resolve things. So in a way, I'm not even against it. I just dislike the lying part. Just tell people what to do. Don't confuse them by start saying false, half truth there.
Yes, I totally, I get that. A couple things I was thinking about, which may be one of them may be an X factor to what we're talking about. So when we're talking about sheep, I will admit that perhaps I'm speaking of the perception of more sheep, and it may be because we see more evidence of it because everyone has a cell phone, and I have a TikTok account. So that could be the case. Another factor, though, to consider is that I think the impact of commercialism has sort of created maybe less of an incentive to go. So if I just go and get more stuff, if that is the greatest goal is for me to have this kind of car and for me to have this kind of house and like this, then perhaps I will allow even very important pieces of information to just get, like I won't even address them. I won't, I won't, I won't think them through adequately. I'll just, hey, whatever, somebody else is doing that, this kind of thing. So I think that is something. And then the other thing I was going to say is just this issue of, I think there is a sense of degradation over time if you use the popular arts as a sort of research pool. If you look at the popular music, maybe of the '60s, Motown, and all of the great music that has happened since then, and then if you look at the popular music of today, it does seem as though there has been some sort of reducing things to a certain lowest common denominator, and more of a perfecting of that, what that common denominator is, and no need to sort of dance around it, but to just go straight to it. And the folks involved get more rich faster. It's destroying our culture, our society. WAP and all of this, rumors. I mean, we could go on and on, but that kind of music with that kind of imagery would never be popular in the past. And it's not just because of the imagery. Of course, that would be a reason why it wouldn't, but it also wouldn't be because the general listener would think it was garbage music because they would be comparing it to Motown. So if you can clearly see that happening in the music, then maybe it is happening as I'm saying. Maybe there are actually more sheep. So I went around in a circle, I understand, but I'm saying.
I see. Now, I there are various, because of the subjectivity in this kind of in other words, the perception of people as sheep, right? Because you're seeing them, they seem sheepish to you, right? Because of that, there are many kind of complicated models one could imagine in terms of to try to explain it away, if you will. Because if we go with the premise that, hey, these people were worshiping the calf, something they just created. They were like, this golden calf let us out of Egypt. And then you're like, whoa, but bro, what the? So,
Yeah.
But also there's still this other thing that we tend to see. There's
Okay,
a model that
I agree with the Dr. Thunder with a slight nuance in there.
So give your nuance, okay, and then I'll kind of wrap it up, and then we'll give the last word to Dr. Thunder because we've reached that time on this broadcast.
Okay. So here's what I agree, and this is where I want to add the extra nuance. I do think there is technically more sheep, not just because it's more people. Already, there actually is literally more people, so more sheep. But I also do think statistically related to the population, there is more sheep, and I'll explain why. It's because back in the days, generally what happened is we had more fundamental beliefs in certain principles. Let's say people followed the commandments of Yahweh, right? People tried to do it the best that they could, and they held each other responsible for it. So what this meant is it created better men, right, who could stand for certain principles. So it's harder for you to sway them across time than it is today. Today we have a lot more things at our disposal, right? It's the understandability era in Netflix or music, I guess, as Dr. Thunder said. It's hard for us to choose good things because we're surrounded by so many things that we don't have the ability to go and stand for something that is actually good. It's hard. Whenever people say I listen to everything, right, I actually switch off because I know they don't know anything. This is the case. What music do you like? Oh, I like everything. And then you ask them what they like, and they don't even know. And also, what they tend to like is garbage as well. That's the other thing. They don't have the discernment to figure out good, even in the genres that they say they like. So yeah, I think there's a lot more everything. So this makes it hard for people to discern correctly, and there's also less of the foundational sort of principle following certain sets of principles. So yeah, people are easier led and sort of miss.
Mm-hmm. So you resolved the point brought up by Dr. Thunder. There are more sheep, and also they may actually be more from a ratio perspective as well, because of the more choices, because people are not focused again, and perhaps they were more tribal silos where they were focused on a truth and they were aligned in that form. But now with all these choices,
look, you will fall for anything. See, see that Eyes on Sama had it right from the beginning. Right from the beginning. So I'm telling you, we didn't.
So it is we're asking this question, okay, and we'll continue next time. Okay, we'll continue next time on this conversation about standing for something, because we have not talked so much about the utility of it, and we're also not talked about certain nitty-gritty aspects of how, for example, to push away the various competitors for our principled stance, shall we say. Our family may say, hey, you should stand with us. We have right to you because blah, blah, blah. The country may say that. The people may, whatever. Your religion may say something. The story, okay, from Shakespeare on and so on and so forth. And for those of you who are not fond of Shakespeare, my bad. But good stories for time immemorial have been about the conflicts, okay, represented in the lives of individuals that are brought upon by, my family against your family, Romeo and Juliet, that kind of a thing, right? And love is another principle. Should we stand for our love, or should we stand? That kind of a thing. We haven't gone to the nitty gritty. Hey, Dr. Thunder, how do you push people back? How do you do this and do that and so on and so forth? But today we have established the fact that there are at least two poles. There are two peaks here we need to look for. The peak of maximal standing for something, let's say, maximal concentration, acute. I've picked a door in that hallway, to use the C.S. Lewis reference. I have concentrated. I've removed, therefore, distractions. I've removed inefficiencies. I am focused. Okay, I'm standing for something, and therefore I don't fall for other things, and so on and so forth. But also, another peak is the peak of being able to discern and stay on the fence just long enough, or to not be so rigid based on certain things that you either know or certain principles that you have, right? In other words, not to play the transtemporal game rather than to just say this principle is true, therefore in every instance of my life I'm going to act in a certain way in accordance with this principle. Rather, you say, well, let me look at myself and the future self and the future of this relationship, the future of X, Y, and Z, the future of this endeavor, and so that kind of transtemporal view and so on and so forth. So we talked about all of that, right? And we got to the part of people being sheep, because it's obviously about, standing versus falling, and how media and the modern landscape, shall we say, provide unique challenges and change the ways in which this comes through in terms of infinite choices, blah, blah, blah. With that, let me give you the last word, Dr. Thunder. We will be back to talk more about some practical and pragmatic aspects of what exactly you should stand for, and what exactly and how you should deal with the competition of those vying for your principal stance, if you will.
Yeah, can you go back to 16:9?
Gotcha.
So, yeah, good show. It's always a great rapping with you, man. And seems like the last couple shows, we kind of end up where we began, but it's always the sort of interesting sort of development and everything. It seems to me that nuance is the key. If you don't want to be rigid or characterized it as rigid, you need to be able to recognize nuance and sort of constantly be developing some additional depth. If you're doing that, then you'll likely not be seen as being too rigid. I have a couple things coming up. In particular, tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I've got a Thunder's Thoughts episode coming up. It's going to be all about mate selection, and I'm going to be breaking down 3 videos with Dr. Doug, one from Jordan Peterson, one from CGA, and one from Rebecca Lynn Pope, and all about mate selection. So that's going to be a cool show. It's an hour later than what we have sort of established as our new time, which has been 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. But now we're going to be doing, like I said, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for tomorrow. So come and check it out on my channel. It's going to be a interesting conversation. And yeah. And of course, again, we'll be back here next week on Ike's channel, getting ish done and digging deeper and searching for more nuance.
100%. Shout out to those in the chat. Shout out to the super chatters again. Shout out to our very generous friend Jonathan Barronville JB for the $50 super chat. Much appreciated. And to those listening right now, thank you very much for spending this evening with us. It's an honor and a pleasure for you guys to be out here spending your time talking about these things, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Adult Supervision, Felicia and Dee, and hope you guys are staying out of trouble out there and not trolling too hard in these YouTube streets. I will be back here tomorrow with Joan reviewing some piece of content. Okay, some very juicy piece of content from popular culture, and we're going to be breaking it down on the review. And with that, we are out. Peace, ladies and gentlemen.
the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity, tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.